I am a camel. I'm a camel, but I'm not a real camel. No ordinary camel. I'm a spirit camel, a ghost camel. I appear and disappear. And one time, in my appearing and disappearing, something very peculiar and wondrous happened. I want to tell you about that story, and also what the other real camels have to say about Muhammad, peace be upon him. The camels knew Muhammad, peace be upon him, from when he was a little boy, and he would graze them in his childhood and look after them with the sheep. They all say he was kind, that he was loving and generous to them. They say he never used to leave them to go play with his friends. He would stay right beside them and would be worried for them in case some animal harmed them in the desert. These camels knew him to be kind when he rode them too. They carried him on their back down south to a country called Yemen, and up north to a place called Sham, whenever he went to sell his goods on business. They saw him in the marketplaces of Mecca. They saw him in Medina and Sana'a, down in Yemen, and Damascus, up north in Sham, buying and selling his goods. They never saw a more honest and honorable man than Muhammad, peace be upon him. And they never heard him swear an oath by the idols of Quraysh like the Arabs used to do. So that's what the other camels, the real camels, have to say about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But as for my story is completely different. It's strange, it's wonderful, and exciting. One day, a foreign merchant came to Mecca with some camels he had brought to sell. And Abu Jahl had bought them from him. Now, Abu Jahl didn't want to pay for these camels, and so he took them without giving any money and promised to pay later. But when the merchant asked for his money, Abu Jahl shunned him and was determined not to pay a penny. The merchant began searching all over Mecca for a man who could talk to Abu Jahl and make him pay the price of the camels. The merchant asked everyone he met about a man who his character and his word could get him what he was owed. Now, on the road, the merchant met two disbelieving men from Mecca. He told them all about the story of Abu Jahl and how he had taken the camels and then refused to pay for them, and then he asked them if they knew of someone who could get him what he was owed. Now, by coincidence, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was passing down the same road at the same time. Now, this was at a time when the Wahi had just started to come down from the heavens on the Prophet, peace be upon him, and he was calling people secretly to Islam. The disbelievers of Mecca used to make fun of him and hurt him and those that followed him. An idea popped into the head of one of the two men, how he could play a joke on Muhammad, peace be upon him, and get Abu Jahl to insult him. You see, Abu Jahl hated Islam and the Prophet Muhammad and all that followed him. So he said to the merchant, "Go to Muhammad, that man who is walking over there. He'll get you what you're owed." The second man understood, and he joined in. He said to the merchant, Yes, Abu al-Hakam," for that was what the people of Mecca used to call Abu Jahl before Islam. "Abu al-Hakam loves this man a lot and will listen to anything that he says. So hurry up and catch up to Muhammad. He'll get you what you're owed." So the merchant sped along and caught up with Muhammad, peace be upon him, and told him his story, saying, "I'm not from this land. I sold some camels to Abu al-Hakam, that's Abu Jahl, and he hasn't paid me their price, and he won't pay anything. So I asked about a man that could help me get back the money that I'm owed, and they all told me that I should resort to you. So will you please help me get my money for me? Please, I beg you. Muhammad, peace be upon him, took the merchant's arm and left straight away to the home of Abu Jahl. The other two men laughed as they walked behind, looking forward to Abu Jahl's reaction when he saw Muhammad, peace be upon him, with this man. They couldn't wait for Muhammad to fall into their trap. They'd be laughing for days and weeks after. They were already congratulating themselves when Muhammad, peace be upon him, knocked the door of Abu Jahl. A voice from behind the door said, "Who is it?" The Prophet, peace be upon him, replied, "It is Muhammad. Come out to me." Abu Jahl opened the door. The two men couldn't wait to see what was going to happen. Muhammad said in a calm and firm voice, "Give this man what you owe him." Suddenly, Abu Jahl's appearance changed. His face turned yellow and he began trembling. He started stuttering something and lowered his head in a sign of obedience and went back into his house. He looked absolutely terrified. The merchant was astonished, as were the two Meccan men who were watching from afar. They were expecting Abu Jahl to explode with rage and grab Muhammad and harm him like he'd never done before. But instead, they were left perplexed, wondering to themselves what on earth had happened. Perhaps he's gone inside to fetch a stick, or a whip, or a giant rock, or a red-hot skewer from the fire. That's what Muhammad deserves for daring to do this. So they waited. They waited for Abu Jahl to return with a red-hot skewer or a rock or something like that. And Abu Jahl did return. He returned quickly. But something was completely different. He brought the money with him, the money that he owed the merchant for the camels. The two men wrung their hands in grief. They could have kicked themselves. And as for the merchant, he couldn't believe his eyes. He'd got hold of his money with such ease and so unbelievably quickly. Muhammad, peace be upon him, asked him, "Is this everything you're owed?" The merchant replied, Yes, it's everything." So Muhammad, peace be upon him, left, without waiting for so much as a word of thanks from the foreign merchant. The two men hurried over to Abu Jahl's house to be certain of what had happened, because they were both confused, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The merchant counted his money for them and said, "Thank you. Thanks to this great man Muhammad, peace be upon him, I couldn't imagine that he'd be able to get hold of what was owed to me so quickly and so easily." The two men rushed off to Quraysh to tell them of what had just happened, and to tell them what they had just seen with their own eyes of what a coward Abu Jahl was, and how he had cowered in front of Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now, when Quraysh heard the story, they were dumbfounded, astonished. And so, the leaders of Quraysh gathered together and rushed off to the house of Abu Jahl to knock at his door, to find out what really happened. How could he obey Muhammad and surrender to him and be so scared? How on earth did Muhammad get him to pay the merchant so quickly, when Abu Jahl was determined not to pay? But when they got to the house of Abu Jahl, there was another surprise waiting for them. Abu Jahl was too afraid to even open the door. After some time, Abu Jahl reluctantly opened the door. The leaders of Quraysh had a bunch of angry questions for him. And so Abu Jahl told him what had happened. I opened the door, and when I saw Muhammad, I wanted to do him some evil. How dare he come to me with this merchant trying to get his money back? But suddenly, it was as if I saw an enormous camel looking down at me from above Muhammad. Its mouth was wide open, and I could see his fangs wanting to swallow me up if I tried to argue with him or remain standing. I needed to get away from this terrifying camel before it would swallow me up. So I ran inside my house. But I felt it following me. I felt it would still get me if I didn't hurry up and find the money that I owed the merchant. So that's what I did. I gave him the money, then I locked the door and rushed back into my home. The men of Quraysh started to laugh and mock Abu Jahl. Ha 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 ha, of course! You ran back inside so the camel wouldn't follow you again. Ha ha ha. Another person said, maybe you didn't want to open the door to us because you were scared that it was Muhammad knocking again. Ha 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 ha. And a third person added, an enormous camel, you say, that was looking down on you from over the head of Muhammad, wanted to swallow you. They all burst out laughing and mocked him over and over again. Now the two men, they were also there, and said, we were watching what happened. There was no camel with Muhammad looking down at Abu Jahl from over his head. The elders of Quraysh said, be honest, you were frightened by the courageousness of Muhammad, how daring he was to come up to your door and demand the merchant's money. And so you imagined this ghost camel. And by the looks of you, you're still afraid it might return. Ha 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 ha. So that day, despite the trap and the plan of those two wicked men from Mecca, the Quraysh laughed at Abu Jahl instead of laughing at Muhammad. And they mocked and scoffed their trembling, frightened leader. I was that camel, the ghost camel, that looked down and frightened Abu Jahl. And that was my story.